Against all odds, humanity has made it to 2020. A new and promising year of cinema is upon us once again, and I'm here to give you 10 reasons to look forward to it with my personal list, emphasis on personal, of the most anticipated movies of 2020. I'm going to explain my process and criteria, but if you'd prefer to skip straight to the countdown, I won't judge you. Feel free to click the time code in the description, and stick around after the countdown for some honorable mentions and my reasoning in excluding other upcoming films. First of all, I've been doing lists like this for years now, and I've got to say 2020 has the most mouth-watering slate I have ever seen. I'm practically salivating. I'm not exactly sure why that is. It might be some psychological thing wherein filmmakers and the movers and shakers that be want to make a grandiose entrance into the new decade, and this one most of all. I mean, what artist can resist the allure of a year as iconic and futuristic as 2020? For this list, I considered and researched well over 100 films. Narrowing it down to just 10 was rather torturous. Alas, this is the kind of sadomasochistic task us list makers love to embark upon, is it not? This may not come as a surprise, but I find when it comes to making and ranking a list of most anticipated movies that the director, and quite often the writer-director, is my chief concern. Admittedly, I've long subscribed to the auteur theory, which, simply put, is that the director is the closest thing to a film's author, while firmly acknowledging that it's often hundreds, if not thousands of people who get a film made when all is said and done. That said, it's a director's body of work, a track record if you will, that gives me reason or reasons to be in an anticipatory state to begin with. The second most important thing for me is the story itself, whatever the content of that film project may be, whether it's an original work or, like the majority of my top 10, a work of adaptation. We each have our own sections of the proverbial video store that we gravitate towards, and I tend to linger longer down shelves of concrete genre ilk like horror and sci-fi, so you can expect that to be reflected in my personal choices. Actors, similar to directors, have to be known quantities, and it's often their involvement and the tantalizing mixture of two or more tremendous talents that can give one film the edge over another. Of course, there's other factors to consider and countless other artists involved, from cinematographers to composers to editors, who are all filmmakers in their own right, and each play a vital part in the production. Hopefully that provides some insight into how I make these lists, and while nothing could possibly be more arbitrary and trivial, I assure you it's not a willy-nilly affair and I spend entirely too much time working on them. The most important distinction worth repeating is that this is my personal list. There's never going to be a rank list of anticipated movies, or anything else for that matter, that we would all agree upon, and that's the wonderful thing about opinions. Everyone has their own.
Yeah, well, that's just like, your opinion, man.
Alright, with that insufferable preamble out of the way, let's start the countdown. Number 10, Rebecca. This adaptation of Daphne du Maurier's novel of the same name, which has been brought to the screen again and again, most notably by Alfred Hitchcock 80 years ago, is helmed by Ben Wheatley. Yes, the guy behind Kill List, High Rise, and other insanities. I would have never pegged him to adapt this literary classic, but I also would have never pegged him to adapt Tomb Raider either. The film stars Lily James as the new bride to the wealthy widower played by Armie Hammer, but my favorite bit of casting has to be Kristen Scott Thomas as Mrs. Danvers. No word on a release date yet, but the film is being distributed by Netflix, and they do like to keep those dates close to the vest, which, spoiler alert, is going to come up again and again in this list. Regardless, it won't be long until we're all at Manderley again.
Last night, I dreamt I went to Manderley again.
Number 9, Last Night in Soho. Since capping his beloved Cornetto trilogy in 2013, writer-director Edgar Wright has continued to play in the sandbox of all things genre. While his Ant-Man adaptation for Marvel never saw the light of day, Baby Driver hijacked the heist film to joyous results. Next, Wright will be returning to the hallowed realm of horror with Last Night in Soho, where a modern-day girl played by Thomasin McKenzie has a mysterious connection with a young woman from the past played by Anya Taylor-Joy, through whom she gets to experience the swingin' 60s of London. How exactly that chalks up to a horror film, one reportedly inspired by Roman Polanski's Repulsion and Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now, is anyone's guess, but I know I can't wait to find out. Focus Features releases Last Night in Soho in September. Number 8, Green Knight. If I were to make a short list of writer-directors who have both arrived and thrived in the last decade, David Lowery would easily make the cut. From his auspicious debut, Ain't Them Bodies Saints, to his experimental and existential exercise, A Ghost Story, he was one of the foremost filmmakers of the 2010s. And by the look of things, he's off to an early start for the next decade with a curious adaptation of the 14th century poem, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Few terms prick my ears quite like medieval fantasy, and with Weta Digital working on the effects, I'm doubling down. Dev Patel, Barry Keoghan, and the Tomb Raider herself, Alicia Vikander, sweeten the pot. And I can't believe I've mentioned Tomb Raider twice now in this video. Look for Green Knight when A24 distributes later this year. Number 7, Blonde. Simply put, this is an imagining of the life of Marilyn Monroe adapted from the Joyce Carol Oates novel of the same name. Norma Jean will be played by the alluring and talented Ana de Armas, fresh off her biggest role to date in Knives Out. The reason I'm most excited for this film is that it's Australian writer-director Andrew Dominik's first scripted film in the better part of a decade, and if you've seen his Western masterpiece, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, you'd probably understand the anticipation. In an interview with Collider, Dominik said he thinks it will be one of the 10 best films ever made, and I honestly don't quite know what to make of that, but damn do I admire that confidence. Look for Blonde whenever Netflix decides to unleash it on the world. Number 6, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. That's the title of the movie, guys. I'm alright. I'm okay. Adapted from the psychological thriller of the same name by Ian Reid, this is the story of a young woman on a trip to meet the parents of her boyfriend when things take an unexpected and horrifying detour. And now, I could think of several filmmakers suited for this task, but Charlie Kaufman isn't one of them. The writer of contemporary classics such as Being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and the writer-director of Synecdoche, New York and Anomalisa, has given us some of the most inventive and existential films of the last 20 years, all of which defy categorization. It's the very notion of a storyteller like Kaufman taking on what seems to be a straightforward narrative that has me so interested. And it's a tale of two Jessies, Plemons and Buckley, two talented performers that have stepped into the limelight in recent years that seal the deal. If you've been playing the Netflix drinking game, take a swig, as they will be distributing the film later this year. Number 5, Mank. Speaking of long-awaited returns to the big screen, this marks David Fincher's first film since 2014's Gone Girl. Since then, he's been busy with the Netflix original series Mindhunter, which, if you haven't seen, you're really missing out on one of the more unique ongoing serial dramas. Mank stands for Herman J. Mankiewicz, played here by the great Gary Oldman, who was the American screenwriter behind Citizen Kane. The film chronicles what is described as the tumultuous development of Orson Welles' iconic 1941 movie. Movies about movies are like catnip for cinephiles and filmmakers alike, and when it happens to be about what is widely considered one of the greatest movies of all time, well, that sounds like cinematic heroin. One of the more interesting aspects of this film is that the script is actually written by David Fincher's own father, Jack Fincher, who previously served as chief editor of Life magazine. I can only imagine what this project must mean to him. Mank is yet another film that will be distributed by Netflix, who has become a major awards contender in recent years, and you can bet they'll be rolling out the red carpet for this one in the fall. Number 4, The French Dispatch. First of all, I just need to acknowledge how insane it is that a new Wes Anderson film is only number 4 on this list, which just highlights how incredible 2020 is shaping up to be, or in the very least, just how excited I am for the next 3 films. The French Dispatch marks Anderson's first live-action film since The Grand Budapest Hotel, which just might be his best film, which makes its inevitable yet long overdue induction into the Criterion Collection all the more difficult to endure. Set in a fictional 20th century French city, because of course it is, this will feature a collection of stories from the eponymous magazine and is reportedly a love letter to journalists, so you can expect critics to lick this one clean off the plate. It wouldn't be a Wes Anderson film without a stacked cast, and seriously, just look at this. A premiere at Cannes seems more than fitting for this one, while us non-fancy pants film festival folks can anticipate a release by Fox Searchlight sometime thereafter. Number 3, Annette. The last time we saw a film from French director Léos Carax was all the way back in 2012 with Holy Motors, a film chock full of images and moments that I've thought about countless times in the intervening years. One has even graced my channel since its inception. I've been impatiently waiting what he would do next, checking his IMDb every few months, but it was radio silence for years.
One eternity later.
Until we learned about his new project, Annette. A musical about a stand-up comedian, his opera singer wife, and their gifted daughter, starring two of my favorite actors, Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard. I have no idea what to expect, but I suspect it will be unforgettable. This also seems like a safe bet for Cannes, where Holy Motors premiered in competition. Amazon Studios has distribution rights. Number 2, Dune. Frank Herbert's epic science fiction novel Dune has been challenging mankind since its release in 1965. It is a dense account of noble houses fighting over the spice, an invaluable resource of an otherwise inhospitable desert planet. Readers young and old have wrestled with its pages, but that literary plight pales in comparison to the ambitious filmmakers who have attempted to bring Herbert's saga to the screen. See the fascinating documentary Jodorowsky's Dune for one auteur's failed attempt, and see David Lynch's infamous adaptation for another. A decade ago, Paramount tried to deliver yet again to no avail. Enter Denis Villeneuve, whose meteoric rise with films like Prisoners, Sicario, and Arrival was truly something to behold. Then, in 2017, he delivered a sequel nobody was asking for in Blade Runner 2049, and by Jove, it was even better than the original. Not to mention the perfect audition for a staggering sci-fi project like Dune. And if that wasn't enough, the film stars my wife's boyfriend Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides, Rebecca Ferguson, Poe Dameron, Thanos, Drax, Aquaman, Anton Chigurh, and the lady from 45 Years. I'm just being flippant. Charlotte Rampling, you are a legend. Warner Brothers will be releasing Dune in IMAX and 3D on December 18th. So how on earth is that not my number 1? Well, because of what is my number 1. But before I get there, allow me to explain how exactly I made this Sophie's Choice. I thought up a little hypothetical to determine the ultimate ranking here. If all these films were magically playing at a multiplex at the same time, and I had my pick of the litter, which one would I go into first? Well, if I had to be completely honest with myself, which I was, that would be... Number 1, Tenet. This is the next film from Christopher Nolan, and that's really all I have to say. Okay, I'll say a little bit more. Tenet is an action thriller dealing in globe-trotting espionage, some sort of time travel, and apparently human evolution, all to prevent World War III, which is seeming more like a reality every day. Of all of Nolan's previous films, Tenet feels the most like Inception, which I suspect it could even be a stealth sequel to, though that doesn't even seem too stealthy at this point. Regardless, Inception was blockbuster perfection that I managed to see 3 times in its opening week because I just had to keep showing it to people, if only for that hallway fight scene. Nolan's last film was Dunkirk, which I consider to be his masterpiece up to this point, and the perfect culmination of his career. I don't know how you follow that up. I don't know how you top that, but I am as excited as can be to see him try. Starring John David Washington, Elizabeth Debicki, my boy Robbie Patty, and of course Michael Caine, who, let's be real, must be holding one of Nolan's children as a hostage, right? Best of all, we only have to wait for summer when Warner Brothers distributes Tenet in IMAX 70mm, baby, on July 17th.
Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
There you have it, my 10 most anticipated movies of 2020. Stick around for some honorable mentions and my reasoning in excluding other upcoming films. But first, I'd like to invite you to share your own list in the comments below, as I'm sure they will differ from mine. I look forward to joining you in conversation. As I said at the top, 2020's crop of films is staggering. In other years, No Time to Die, the 25th Bond film, which is directed by Cary Fukunaga, would have easily made the list. The same could be said for the upcoming Pixar film Soul, a pitch-upon where Aesthetical's Memoria, Kelly Reichardt's First Cow, Armando Iannucci's The Personal History of David Copperfield, Ridley Scott's The Last Duel, and Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods. Chloe Zhao will be living the best of both worlds with the indie film Nomadland and the 25th entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Eternals. Speaking of the MCU, I am interested to see how the Black Widow movie turns out, and Mulan might be the first Disney live-action remake I'm actually excited to see. I'm anxious over Steven Spielberg's West Side Story remake and all the inevitable think pieces that will be written about it. Pablo Larraín's Emma, which made my top 10 list last year, will finally get a US release in the summer. Then there's the upcoming films that are in various stages of production that I'm not entirely convinced will be released this year at all. I'm talking about Terrence Malick's The Last Planet, Ho Xiaoxin's Shulan River, Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley, Joel Cohen's Macbeth, Paul Schrader's The Card Counter, Wong Kar-wai's Blossoms, and untitled projects from the likes of Jonathan Glazer and my MVP Paul Thomas Anderson. If we don't see them this year, you can expect those to be in my list of most anticipated movies of 2021 and beyond. Those are just some of the additional movies I've got my eye on. I could go on, but I have to stop sometime. Like I said, 2020 is absolutely brimming with potential, and I'm sure I'm not alone in looking forward to watching and discussing as many as I can. Once again, I'd like to invite you to share your own list of anticipated movies of 2020 in the comments below. I'll see you down there. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe to Cineflect for more movie lists, video essays, and other cinematic experiments, and click that bell next to the subscribe button if you'd like to be notified anytime I upload a new video. For Cineflect, I'm J.S. Lewis. Happy New Year.